As top law enforcement officer, I am obligated to hold bad actors accountable whenever and wherever such violations occur, irrespective of party affiliation. Free and fair elections are the foundation of our system of government and one of the most important principles in our democracy. People should have confidence in our election system and a belief that their vote counts. Our democracy must be perpetually defended by every generation of Americans.
You know, this has to be really kind of confusing and disconcerting for these Trumpists that you actually have elected leaders.
Right.
Who don't let you lie about being electors to the United States Congress for the purposes of actually representing the state of Michigan and who they actually voted for. And so, again, these are basic things. I think what we're going to look back on years from now, and you're starting to see, again, we've been talking for about a year now, maybe 9 months, about how gravity is returning. That actually all the things that we thought like no longer matter in this country did matter. Gravity's returning. I think a lot of people are going to look back after Trump is gone years from now and just say, how did these people... How did they ever think they were going to get away with that?
I know.
What they're going to ask, what was going on between 2015 and 2021 that made these people think they could act like thugs, beat the hell out of cops, try to overthrow the federal government, lie repeatedly, be part of this scheme, all because they wanted to get close to a former reality TV host who had lost election after election after election after election. Like, they will ask, well, why did they do it? And we still don't have that answer.
I think it'll be a really, those questions sound like a farce, but I think that's going to be a really important discussion as to how we got here and what were the different factors involved over the course of decades.
And these people who knew better, who knew they were breaking the law, who knew they were lying, who knew they were trying to undermine democracy, not some generalized concept, but democracy in their own state, trying to undermine the will of the people who had just voted pretty comfortably in Michigan, by the way. Not as close as the race was before, but voted for Joe Biden instead of Donald Trump. And you had people who actually plotted and schemed to take away the popular vote, like they were in Turkey or Russia or in Saddam Hussein's Iran. It's just crazy.
So that was Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel announcing felony charges for 16 people who worked to overturn the state's 2020 election results. The defendants allegedly met in the basement of the Michigan Republican Party's headquarters and signed multiple certificates claiming they were Michigan's duly elected and qualified electors for the presidential election. Some of the electors then tried to deliver the documents to the state Senate, but were turned away. Each of the defendants faced several forgery-related charges, which could result in multi-year jail sentences. The 16 people include a state Republican National Committee chairwoman, as well as a former state Republican Party co-chair. Unbelievable.
It really is.
Committee woman.
And Joyce Vance, again, gravity returns. People, again, you just wonder what people were thinking at the time. They said, we're going to lie about being electors. We're going to try to Donald Trump has this Keystone Cop plan for fake electors, which apparently is going to end up snagging a lot of people, not only on the state level, but possibly on the federal level. But what's going to be the outcome for these people, again, trying to take away the vote from their fellow Michigan residents?
So Attorney General Nessel, I think, said words that will resonate throughout this historical conversation that you and Mika have been talking about, this question of how did the fever dream last for so long? Dana Nessel says democracy has to be defended perpetually. And so she's put down her markers that she intends to be part of that process. And she's starting in classic prosecutorial fashion at the bottom of this particular food chain, not of the entire food chain, where we've seen rioters and protesters prosecuted by the Attorney General in the District of Columbia. But here we see where it began in Michigan with people who tried to overturn the outcome of the election. Something like close to 155,000 more votes for Joe Biden than for Donald Trump. God. But you have folks engaged in a clear scheme of forgery and election crimes. And Nessel makes an important point. She says, I have to prosecute this case because I prosecute forgery every day, and I prosecute people who try to fraudulently obtain absentee ballots. And if I didn't prosecute these people, would it be because they were well-connected political actors? You know, in some ways that makes it worse. We'll see that as the evidence in this case evolves. These were people who understood what they were doing, who knew what was going on, who were asked to conduct themselves with great secrecy to conceal what they were about, and who ultimately were living in the same environment that we were all living in, watching lawsuit after lawsuit be dismissed in courts who said there was no fraud that tainted this election. So these folks, these are what prosecutors would call righteous targets for prosecution.